So today I wanted to talk more about the culture wars and what rages against self besides your own internal, not struggles necessarily, but your own internal journey. And earlier I was talking about paying attention to the thoughts that you have heard, you have been taught that you don't necessarily believe. And for me, a lot of that comes from what I call the CEO culture. And the CEO culture is, of course, those, vague speaking, sweater vested morons. But apparently they're fooling millions and millions of people. And they're involved with, controlling billions of dollars of assets and faith credits. So while I see that class as kind of like, car dealership owners, I have to recognize that they represent a reality, a part of humanity. It's not going to go away, and they're not going to shirk at my criticisms. So to speak, so what? But it goes into thinking about wealth culture and who is espousing these non-self thoughts. And it comes from the people at the top, in my opinion, who are saying things or couching things in ways that are only seen as valuable through the lens of wealth culture. For instance, if you were to know someone and for some reason or another you knew that they were worth millions of dollars, the average person in America would give them more weight for whatever purpose in their daily discussions or their criticisms in business or social than anything else. And that someone like myself, and no, I'm not jealous, I'm who is not a millionaire and does not espouse wealth culture. If I were to say something, I would immediately be less believed because I am not a millionaire, right? So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that people do and say things to make money, and then they keep doing and saying things that made them money, even though that might divert people away from self. And what I've seen, or how I've seen this, and not just in my own personal life, but in my kids, and in kids who've grown up since the 2000s, and probably even before then, is that if you don't have money, you ain't worth shit. And if you're not successful, then you're a loser. And the only way you're successful is if you have a lot of money. And people will talk around the edges of that. But that is one of the fundamental tenets of popular American culture now. And people talk this and that, but dude, if you don't have a fat bank account, just shut the fuck up. And that is pervasive. And a lot of that comes from the image makers and the image managers at the top. And I just wanted to recognize that for someone who else is also seeking self, and just to say, listen, if someone is worth more than $10 or $20 million, I inherently suspect the words of wisdom, quote, wisdom and business advice that are coming out of their mouths. And people say, well, don't you want to be rich? Don't you want to know what the magic is? Well, very few people will tell you what the actual magic is, because so much of our current economy is based on corruption, lies by omission, outright lies, manipulation thereof, and image management of some of those aspects and or more. Where the average young person comes out of school or even during school and says to themselves, I like to do this, I like to do this, I like to be alive, I like to chase women, I like to drink beer, I like to have fast cars, but the bottom line is, I got to make a lot of money. And this feeds into urban culture, in my opinion, where you have to be in the city to make a lot of money, and you have to make a lot of money to be in the city, this self-perpetuating thing. And the people at the top, the penthouse folks, or a few low levels down, who perpetuate this with their words and their life energy and their bank accounts, in my opinion, are a danger to the fabric of a liberty and free, a liberty-loving and free society, because they take the naivete and the energy of youth and they how do you say it? They provide themselves as a beacon so that a young person will chase the dollar rather than chasing fulfillment, thinking that dollar will lead to fulfillment. Now, this is an old saw that you can't buy happiness, but you sure as hell buy chicks and Cristal champagne and a nice car and a condo. But 10 or 20 years down the road, you ask yourself, okay, well, I've had the car, I've had the Cristal, and I've had the bitches. Then what's the point? And that's where the rubber meets the road. But in the meantime, you will have lost those years if you weren't chasing fulfillment of self. And that's my message to the young people, is that it's not about not making money. It's not about not turning a profit. It's not about not having successful business relationships. It's identifying the cultural communications, or the communications that influence the culture, the very tippy top, to say, you better be turning a buck or you're doing something wrong. And that is, in my opinion, wrong. And it leads to empty lives. It leads to people who are easily influenced to be influenced and swept under the rug in these circumstances. It leads to a political culture where you can literally pay to play and you can buy people off. This is not new, but it is also not good. I know there's always money in politics, and there's always going to be money in politics, but my intention with these discussions is to talk about the actual grassroots of the cultural struggles, or the cultural, underpinnings of who we are personally and who we are corporately to other people. So that I think that if someone listens to my lectures and they take it to heart and they start thinking in different ways, that hopefully that will spawn a search of self within them, so that they can have maybe a rectification of what they want their lives to be, and that their definition of success will include self at the pinnacle, not profit. And that's I've worked in hard-nosed businesses. I've made those decisions. Blah blah blah. Chasing the dollar, chasing the script, all that stuff. There's no brilliance to it. Okay, there's no brilliance to it. It's not that exciting anymore, and it's a little boring, in fact, because it doesn't pan out. Because if we live in a world of people who are just chasing a dollar, then that's what you get, and you don't get self-enriched. You don't get enriched selves sharing themselves with other people, because everyone's talking about the dollar, and the dollar's getting in the way of everything. And again, this is not new, but it doesn't have to be this way, because in my life, I have identified the cultural communications as the source, the seed of the issue. And it's not about legislation. It's not about being angry. It's not about any of that. It's just identifying within myself, and hopefully within yourself, that success is a smile at the end of your life, and sharing that joy of life with the people, well, with yourself first, and with the people in your life. And what I have found is that people who are chasing the dollar, they're not so fun. They can be dreadfully shallow. I mean, kind of like superficially fun, like let's go to the bar and get drunk fun. And I know it's stereotypical, but it's also true. And that can be dreadfully just uninspiring. And I know there's different people. There's people whose true selves are getting drunk in the bar. Or maybe, I don't know. I'm not against bar. I'm not against booze. I'm just saying that there's more to it than that. And that identifying that it's not just me, and it's not just you, and it's not just the city. It's the collection of thoughts and beliefs in the individual persons. And corporately, how is that being influenced on a nationwide or global basis? Well, now that everyone has access to everyone on the phone, I've identified the CEO celebrity wealth culture as the primary propagator of misleading, dangerous ideas. And again, I'm not saying it like it's a great revelation. I'm just saying in your own lives, ask yourself, like, just go, like, really? Is that what you really want? Is that what's really going on? And the other thing when listening to CEOs is listen to, like, what are they not saying? What are they not saying? I was so furious about the 737 Boeing issues where their autopilot system was causing the planes to go down, and their shares dropped and this and that. And the CEO got this big fat golden parachute package after all this was shown that and I was such a waste of an awesome engineering corporation that has pioneered so many safety and efficiency standards for the industry and for the global flying community, and it was all just to turn a buck. And it didn't start that way, and it wasn't built that way, but it's sure as hell continuing that way. And that's just one example. So that now when I see the CEOs talk on the newsrooms or whatever, I just like, dude, this guy is just selling the same shit that they've been selling for years. And now that we have this interpersonal communication via the internet, I think we can call their shit more not out publicly necessarily, but like just say, right. Check the stock price, check their parachute. The worst that ever happens with these guys is they lose their position and they move on to a lesser order. They still stay in the country club or they move to a different country club, and it's just bullshit, and they're shielded by so many laws. And I don't want to get into the legal discussion now, but the legal aspect is a reflection of culture. So that's what I'm talking about at the tippy top, is the culture. And that's why CEOs couch their communication so carefully, and why they have communication coaches, because they know that at the very top of things, it's really about shaping what people believe. Not about the specifics of the product or the price point or the engineering or any of those details. It's all about shaping the perception. And that's why the politicians are equally adept and sensitive to what is actually being said via the press, via how they dress, the whole image. Again, this is not new, but it's just identifying that we don't have to put up with that anymore. Or I am not so excited about putting up with that anymore. And I have worked for billions-dollar corporations, and that I worked for them gladly because they paid me well and I believed in the mission. But I don't have faith in the mission anymore. I have faith in the words of the mission, but I don't have faith in the corporation, meaning the de facto truth of it. And the de facto truth of an American corporation now is you turn a buck or you get turned away. And it's just messed up. It's messed up. Corporate profit culture is a problem. If a company has, I look at it this way. I look at a corporation as a group of people achieving a couple of ends, a few ends. If that is being diverted at the top and polluted and corrupted at the top, meaning that the CEO culture is saying one thing, like, oh, we provide, let's say, like Philips ultrasound machines. Like, we provide, healthy babies because, we help, the physicians help healthy babies because we can see what's in the mother's womb, etc. Right. But the bottom line is, it's not necessarily an improvement. It's just selling the next contract. And that is crapola. And I think that we should, as a corporation of more enriched and enlightened selves, seek out employee-owned operations. I am not against unions, even though they have their own issues. But the whole point is that I think as citizens, we should hold ourselves to a different standard. And that is not corporate. I think it is more like freelance. Like, we should work to have a year or 2 years worth of living monies in our banks so that we can just go. We can just leave. Someone's not doing something right, and the corporation, and rather than having to rewrite the laws or do lawsuits or go through this whole political structure, we can just leave. And just like, well, see ya. It's, fuck you money. Fuck you. Bye. And, go do something either on your own or with another company that's doing something. And I don't see it happening any other way other than if there was a great uprising of people who seek self and, follow my teachings, even though, I'm not about people following my teachings. It's about awakening self. And one of the ways to awaken self is to recognize the intellectual poison. And one of the sources of intellectual poison is the CEO culture that is encoded within our laws and our society and the common culture. And, I'm just calling bullshit to most of it. To most of it. People are like, oh my God, what are you not going to buy from corporate? No. They need to be held to a higher standard. Because currently it's just bullshit, okay? Like, when I buy something, I don't want my monies to be going toward, some fool who's lying to me at the top. And purchasing something that's probably made in China anyway by political slave labor and being resold here, shut the fuck up. That's not what America's about. I mean, it is currently, and we all have benefited from the convenience of slave labor, but it doesn't have to be that way, and it shouldn't continue that way, because ultimately it's not good for the slave labor, and it's not good for us. We need to start the change, and the change starts with self, and the change of self starts by identifying what is self, and by that is, well, I'm not a CEO, and if I ever was a CEO, I wouldn't tell that shit. I think that people should be told things, like, just clearly. And so much of that CEO culture is about not what we're telling you, because it all sounds good. It's what we're not telling you, And, when I was selling pharma, you could say that, the marketing data, the marketing talking points were carefully crafted, and there's some good medicine behind that. Like, literally, like, you shouldn't say certain things if they're not true. But what's not being said on the business end, and I think a more opening of the books that way would yield a great deal of good faith with the medical community, the customers, the users. But the CEO class is going to be absolutely allergic to that, because their stock and trade is the half-truth, the partial truth, the manipulation. Like, oh, this new drug saves lives, blah, 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 comma, hidden quote, and it's worth $5 billion profit every quarter or every year. You think those numbers are a lie? Check them out. Check out Humira's numbers. AbbVie, dude, they've been robbing people blind for years. And, someone who is more detail and action oriented might hear my rant and say, oh, we got to change the law this way. And I like, okay, maybe. But one law is not going to change, 100 years of corporate law, of corporate collection. It really starts at the top, recognizing that it's actually a part of American culture that is ingrained, accepted, protected, and self-protecting and protects themselves, because it's like a club. These guys, I used to, I know. I used to do public relations, and I used to, I worked in pharma, and, it's just a revolving door, and they might, there's different levels, obviously. You got the top and this and that, and, I mean to say, suspect the CEO class, because I think that's a lot of where our corporate thought pollution is coming from, and it's reflected in so many ways. Because if you don't have a success, then you're a loser, and in order to become a success, you need to be either an influencer, a highly sought after skilled worker, own a corporation, or do some amazing philanthropic thing, or do the political angle, where even then you're going to be sucking off the teat of the corporations who have been, stealing from the American public and the global public for years. So, no. It needs to change, and I think what my unique angle is just talking about the thought pollution. Just focus on the thought pollution and not get so into the tactics until you're sure what's going on. I'm talking to myself as well. Until you're sure what's actually going on, because you just get shouted down and shouted out, and no one will, they'll just brush you off and like, yeah, moving on. And that's why when they lose customers, because that's our primary participation in this, is when I go to the store, when I go online, my participation in the corporate culture is shelling out the dough for the thing that I want, and the way to really get people's attention is, yes, there are culture wars and all this stuff, and stop corporate culture. That doesn't necessarily work, because people are so used to thinking about corporations providing for them, and the corporations are good. And the guy who worked at, Raytheon for 40 years and got this big fat retirement, corporations were good for him. And yes, but now things have gotten really polluted, and it's not necessarily the case. And he'll be like, well, what do you mean corporations? No. It's talking about the culture at the top and the words associated with that culture. Just pay attention. Now that you've heard my rant, just listen to the next press release about either a disaster or a stock price or a quarterly stock earnings call. Just listen to that and say to yourself, okay, now that I'm a more enriched self, would I say those words? And the answer is no. Of course, no one would say those words. You're taught to say those words because this is the train. This is the way you make money. You have a product, you have a collection of people as a corporation who are doing something, and you do and say these things, and this is how it happens. And you have different colors of, but it's all the same mindset. And the mindset is essentially, we don't really want to say the truth, but we want to sound like we're saying the truth. And this is just kind of the way it goes. And don't rock the boat. Don't rock the boat. It's good for you. It's good for me. Come on. It's all good. But again, I think the big change is now the interpersonal communication. I'm a big fan of face-to-face, but I mean like dude talking to the internet and hopefully sparking some discussion and thought about what it's all about. And not like, in the old days, it'd be like, oh, dude, you're just a communist. Or, this or that. No, none of that crap. I'm not a communist. I've seen the death of that. Communism is just another way of people stealing money. It's not. No, I'm the biggest fan of people doing things. But the point is, why are we doing them this way if it leads to a distraction from self? If self is the highest goal, then why corporately are we putting up with this? And the answer is just because. There's a lot of just because, and just because is a cultural thing. The people will say like, hey, maybe we should have employee-owned operate. Well, the people who attack that are the very people who are supporting the profit over self. Okay, and that's just dangerous. Okay, it's dangerous. It's not good. It leads to this whole hierarchical society, which is essentially boring unless you're at the top. And even at the top, it's kind of boring. Like who cares if you have a $10 million condo? I mean, your next goal is only to buy a boat or another $10 million condo in another city. And if a city becomes filled with rich corporate fools, then it becomes boring. Culture, genuine selves, is the treasure and the reaping of civilization. Okay, that's where the real shit comes from, is people being themselves, seeking themselves and seeking to share genuine selves with others, whether it's by books or art or business, like a genuine business. They're trying to bring something good to the market. And it only happens when more and more people are seeking that. Otherwise, there are cultural, I keep going back to this, there are cultural, how would you say, cultural, not supportive, not emotionally and psychically supporting that idea, right? If you have a group of young people and they're all about just making money, like American Psycho, for instance, and you introduce a new idea to this group, well, it just gets shouted down, and then therefore your psychic and emotional energy will be drained, even though it might be a great idea, it might even be a foolish idea, but you're not encouraged to bring genuine self ideas to the table because you have a bunch of people who are not being selves. They are being something else. Again, not new, but the dynamics are different. And I have seen this happen a lot with my pharma background and such, that if you introduce ideas that are so contrary to the culture, the corporate culture, you just essentially get shouted down and very explicitly shown the door. Like, the door is over there. It's 5 or 6 steps away, but there is the door. And, HR was always the part of that. Anyway. What was the point I was going to say? Is that that wealth culture is death culture. Wealth culture is death culture. And I'm not talking about health. Everyone wants an appropriate amount of money to pay the physician, to pay for the groceries, to pay for the car, to have a nice house or a reasonable house. But if it yields more than a few million in your bank, I suggest that your life might have misplaced priorities. And I've come close. I've come close to making that threshold. I'm not there yet, but when I pass on, I don't want my kids to think from me that it's all about chasing the dollar. They know that implicitly, but they are currently chasing the dollar because they have to survive in popular culture. They have to. Like, how do you live in a city or a suburban community without being influenced by all these people who are doing the same thing, moving the same direction? And there can be little variations, but not a radical change. I don't know. Maybe these videos will go viral and then they'll listen to me. But those words that a prophet is not respected in his own town. I think the same could be true of fatherhood. The father is not respected until he has some kind of fame or notoriety, and then they go like, oh yeah, I remember all that stuff he said. Anyway, so not to be dismissive of what I've just said. What I've said is actually very insightful and very useful if someone takes it to heart. And I hope you do, and I hope to see you out there somewhere being a richer, fuller self, and paying attention to the thought pollution that comes in, via the eyes and ears and time wasted. Because ultimately, what we have is our lives and the time of our lives. The life power, and it shouldn't be wasted on some things. So anyway, signing off from this beautiful locale. I hope you can see me and hear me. Take care.